Police Department, who's going to speak today. Ms. Keeper from the Head County Prosecutor's Office will speak. And the main speaker, guys, is Mr. Steve Smith. This is his 7th presentation in the last 36 hours. So you may be a little hoarse by the end of this. He's done programs for all the 6th, 7th, 8th, 9th, 10th, and 11th graders over the last 2 days. Great questions from the kids. They were great. They listened. They were very attentive. I appreciate you coming back tonight to hear the same thing, maybe with a little bit more detail than you gave those kids the last 2 days. Without further ado, Cincinnati Bell.
Can you guys hear me okay?
No? Not for you? Okay. Yeah, so today, we're actually by the end of this week, we will have talked to around 40,000 students over the last 4 years. And if you would have told me 4 years ago that I would spend about 50% of my week going around to schools, talking to students about social media, I would have said, why would I be doing that? That's ridiculous. That's not what I do for a living. But the reality is, I came home from work one day, I was sitting on the couch with my wife after work, and I was watching the news, and I heard this strange story about a young lady that somehow this inappropriate photograph of her had been taken, so I'm not sure how it was taken, and it found its way throughout the school. And then beyond that, it was within the community, and then not too long after that, literally throughout the world. And this very popular young lady, her life began to spin out of control. And she felt the burden of living just being too great to continue. And so this girl that had the entire world to look forward to ended up taking her own life. Now that was important to my wife and I at the time because our grandson had just died. Just a little while before that. He died in a medical condition. And there was nothing we could do as a family, the doctors could say, the doctors at Children's Hospital could do to save him. The thing that I knew and folks at Cincinnati Bell knew is there is something we can do as a company that provides enabling technology. We can provide education. We can provide education to mom and dad, school administrators, teachers, and students on what really happens when you use technology. I'm going to do my best to get through this presentation in about an hour, but I can't guarantee I'll be able to be done by 8 o'clock. But what I've done here is I put the tail end of the presentation at the beginning in the event that you have to leave, because it's at the end of the presentation are some of the helpful and some of the things that you can do. And while I would love to see this happen in parents, the one favor I ask you is if you would take what you learned here tonight back to your community and make sure that your friends and family are aware of how great technology really is, but it's got to be managed. We're kind of in this era of where the automobile industry was in the 1960s. Let's tell the kids today. It wasn't until about the 1960s that you started seeing seatbelts in cars. And for those of you who are as old as me, I don't see that old. The seatbelt was just across the lap. It wasn't the shoulder harness, right? And then they decided that maybe we ought to make a shoulder harness. And then they changed the steering column so that when you have an accident, the steering column was over your chest. And then they started burying the dashboards. And of course today, it's all sorts of safety features, including the fact that we have airbags. That is where you are as parents in the world, in this world of technology, right? Your kids are driving cars without seatbelts. There are actually seatbelts you can get, and there are airbags and padded dashboards that you can get. But you have to understand what you're buying, and you have to understand how to manage it. Eventually, this will take care of itself. Right? The technology that will be put in the hands of you, to your family, will be something that I won't say is self-monitoring, but it's a little bit easier to monitor. So keep in mind, that's where you are today. And I told the kids, and I was the only one who's anyone. I love technology, but technology has hit us so hard, and it came out so fast. We passed out tablets and smartphones like ridiculous, right? Here, take it, without any thought as to what's really happening and the power of those devices. And that's why I'm here, and that's why I'm passionate about it. I don't want any other young man or young woman finding life being too difficult to bear because of the misuse of technology. So as I say here, but don't panic, because if you are vigilant, there are steps that you're going to be able to take to manage your child. Now, again, I'm giving you the tail end of the presentation, so it's a little weird for me to do this, and I apologize for having to kind of turn around and look at my shoulder. Depending on the age of your child, if they're 17 or 18, a little different, right? But I say, create a tech-free zone, and a tech-free zone means a tech-free zone for parents as well. You know, I'm a very big believer that as great as technology is, it's really divided families, it's fractured families. Communicating within a family anymore is probably a lot more difficult than it was 10 years ago, because mom and dad and junior and Mary, right? They're all on devices at the same time, and so they're communicating outside the family circle, but not necessarily communicating within that family circle. Where does sexting take place a lot? Two places. In the bathroom and in the bedroom. You have to ask yourself, why does a young person need to take a smartphone into their bedroom? Why does a young person need to take a smartphone into the bathroom? Right? I'm not telling you how to manage the life of your child, but what I am telling you is, remember when you were a teenager? If you had the power of this technology today, you'd be doing the same thing that a lot of the good young people here at Harrison High School in this community do. They don't do these things because they're bad. They do it because they're inquisitive, right? And when you consider the culture that surrounds these young people in terms of music and movies and television, and it's almost they become desensitized to a lot of the issues that we're addressing right now. Turn off the GPS. There's no reason to have the GPS on a particularly young person's phone unless you're trying to track them. And it's a good thing. If you're trying to make sure where they are, that's good. It's not a good thing that the creepy guy down the street necessarily knows where your child is. Know the passwords to their devices and accounts. You have to, as the parent, particularly, I'm going to say they're under the age of 17, you've got to know that. You know, whether you're paying the bill or not, because it's in that password, the secret sauce of where a lot of kids find themselves in trouble are the apps that they download. And we're going to be talking about some of the apps, such as apps that hide the apps that they really use, right? Always check your monthly iTunes and Google Play invoice. That's important because if they have downloaded something and you're the one that receives the bill, you'll get a line itemization of everything that's been downloaded to that device. And check your wireless service provider activity account. They all have them. They're not going to show you everything. And the reality of it today is, 3 years ago, if you were checking your like Verizon or AT&T activity account, you know who your kids were texting. You can't really tell that anymore because they're using Snapchat or Kik or some other app like that. Manage your child's privacy. These are two areas. So in other words, one of the bigger thing to me, and I know for schools, you know, we're here, we hear a lot of things about sexting. To me, that's about this much of the equation that we need to be concerned with. A bigger issue for me going forward is privacy. You know, I talk to the children about, we live in a society that's data-driven. Right? Decisions are made about me. Decisions are made about you. Decisions are made about the school system and every school system based off of data. But companies are acquiring data about us, your private information. You can control that. We're going to talk about some of the ways you can control it. But what do you do about the things that have already been captured about you? And you can go to inquirefamily.org. Actually, you can learn how to eliminate or how to set the privacy settings on Instagram, how to set the privacy settings on Facebook. They're actually very, very easy to do. These two, now this is a slide I really had to put up before. These two links will help you delete any of the private information. I shouldn't say any. Much of the private information that's been acquired by you, your family, children, what have you. That one, you can pay up to $129 a year for them to do it. The other is free, but it's a little cumbersome kind of working your way through. And I'll make sure that you have access to to these slides as well. And then this, if there's nothing you take back with you, I'll say this 10 times about other things too. This is an important thing to take back, is that when you download, I'll use my kids as an example, right? So if my grandson comes to me and says, hey, would you mind downloading this app? I'll first look at the app, make sure that it's an okay app and to be involved with. Right? And then I put in the password. Right? And then I download it. But there's about a 15-minute lag time from the time I download it and give it back to my grandson, that if I give it back to him right away, he can take it, he can download anything he wanted to in 15 minutes. It's not always true. Apple and Google are trying to resolve that, but it's on an individual server basis around the world, so not every server has been set up properly or been tuned to that. But that's been a big complaint from parents, because they say, I did protect the password. How did he download that? Because it's about a 15-minute window. And in fact, the last couple of apps I downloaded, there still was a 15-minute window to download anything that you wanted to. So that's what I said. You have to own that. If your son or daughter downloads an app that hides other apps, you don't even know those apps are on your phone. That's why it's important you don't own that. And this is one of the apps. And if you go on to Google Play, if you go on to iTunes, you can look up any number of these apps. Some of them are free, some of them you have to pay for, but their entire intent is to hide the apps they don't want one to see. Commonly, the app looks like a calendar, and if you know the password of the calendar, it's basically a vault, and that's where all the photographs and things like that exist. Parental controls, there are all sorts of parental controls out there. And you know, if I had a 12 or 13-year-old, yeah, I might actually be using those parental controls. A couple things they do, they drain the heck out of your battery. And I actually set one up when I'm using it. It's about $9.99 a month. And everything was set in my phone. Everything that my wife and I did with her phone, everything she did went to my phone, just to see what it's like. And it's very personal. Everything that they do is over your phone. Now, if it's 12-year-old or 13-year-old, it might be worth that type of investment of time. It also keeps your battery. But those are just steps that you can take. Whether you're using AT&T, Verizon, Sprint, they all have plans that use a certain amount of monitoring. Some of them are good, some of them are bad. I was told that parental controls that are on the Verizon or iPhone, that there's some complications with that particular product. But they're all somewhere like $4.99 a month, something like that. I personally would look into that. I think that's something that allows you to, like family locators, knowing where your child is, knowing who they're communicating with. Those are inexpensive steps, I think, that you can take that make an awful lot of sense, particularly when you're talking about younger students. And then for those students that are actually using laptops and things like that, these web monitoring tools, according to Consumer Reports, are considered the top web monitoring tools out there. And then personalize your Google Newsfeed. This is something all of us can do for free. Something that I do, I use it every day. I need to know, you need to know what apps young people are using. You can set that up. You can set up a newsfeed on Google that every article about any new app that's coming out, or if you want to know what's going on with teen sexting, what's going on with online privacy, what's going on cyberbullying, you can actually set those news feeds up so that they're directly sent to your Gmail account. It's terrific. Absolutely terrific. And another one is, have you ever heard of the app Flipboard? Flipboard is an app you can get for Google. You can get it for the iPhone as well. You can set up innumerable things that you're interested in. If you're interested in technology, you're interested in apps, you're interested in psychology, you're interested in teen psychology to understand your children a little bit better, you name it. They have an almost infinite amount of information that will be automatically set up as your own personal magazine with the articles that you're interested in. And look, guys, the reality is there's so much stuff changing, you need help. And you need help not on a monthly basis. You kind of need help almost on a weekly basis. because technology is changing so quickly. And these sites here are websites that do, I think, an extraordinarily good job of helping you monitor what's going on in teen life. The best one out there, I think, is commonsensemedia.org. I don't know if you've ever used that site before. Not only does it help you what's going on with a young person's technology, but it looks at movies, it looks at music, it looks at art, looks at education. It'll tell you what are the best education apps out there. Because let's face it, apps are great for education, right? So you don't want to throw the baby out with bathwater, right? There's some bad apps out there, but there's some very good apps. Common Sense Media is one of the best ones I can recommend. And then I have a blog, almost a weekly blog, or maybe twice a month at the very least. It's at wiredfamily.org. And a lot of the things we're talking about here today, tonight, in fact, don't feel like you have to take notes. There's a lot of things we're talking about tonight you'll find at wiredfamily.org. And I gave Mr. Baker a list of about 7 or 8 links within my blog site. One of them is a video that covers almost everything we're talking about here tonight. And seriously, feel free to call me. I do get calls from parents that run into kind of odd situations and they want some help. They want some guidance. Where can they go to get some help? And I'll do my best. Now, I'm out of the office a lot lately, particularly 9 months out of the year when school's in session. But I check my voicemail all the time and I'm happy to get back in touch with you. So, when I'm out there talking to your children, we're talking about responsible technology, and as I tell them, there are basically 3 components to it, right? There's the device, and we did a little poll today of how many of you, these are 6th and 7th grade, but how many of you have a smartphone? But the reality is, I think almost everybody had a smartphone. If they didn't have a smartphone, they had a device that could be used on the family's wireless network. So they all have devices. But one of the things I tell them is that, devices work, it doesn't have an app. And 6 years ago, with our house, right, the only apps that were really available were for like BlackBerry, right? I made a living with my BlackBerry for probably 13 or 14 years, and I had apps on them, and most of them were business apps plus solitaire. Right? That was the world of the smartphone app. But today, what was going on in business is now made its way down into the family. And who would have thought that almost every one of the 6th and 7th graders in one of the Harrison schools would have smartphones? Right? 6 years ago, you would have said, crazy. That's not going to happen. And now there are 1.3 million apps in the iTunes Store and Google Play. Wow. So it's immensely difficult to keep track of. And so, again, go back to your days when you were in grade school and high school. If you had access to the world, would you try to access it? I know I would. I would definitely access it, right? So these aren't bad kids. These are kids. And you would not toss your car keys to a 13-year-old. Yet we do toss the keys to the tablet and to the smartphone without giving them much education. I'm not beating up parents. I'm just saying that's what's happened to our culture. We didn't really know. The unintended consequences of giving the world to a child is that they'll take advantage of the world. So, to a certain extent, we are a society that's tuned in and tuned out. One of the stories I often tell is I was at dinner with my wife February a year ago, and there was a couple about our same age, that was sitting next to us, and they sat down and never talked to each other the whole time. They were on their smartphone the entire time. And it's like, my office was about kids. It's ironic to me that this device that was created to help us communicate better has really impacted negatively our ability to communicate with people that we theoretically love the most, right? We're looking at smartphones, we're playing games on our smartphone or on our tablet, we're not always paying attention to one another's side of our camera. That's an important statistic here. 45% of teens would rather change their online behavior would if they knew their parents paying attention. And the reality is, as I've talked to young people, I've spoken to over 140,000 of them, they don't think their parents paying any attention. Now, And unfortunately, when you post something online, the potential for it being there forever is pretty real. That's not just something we make up to scare people. That's something that does happen. So when we're talking to kids, the three basic components, safety, privacy, and cyber, right? Biggest growth in my presentation with young people has more to do with privacy. That's kind of my big driver right now, because privacy affects everything. It affects the bullying side, right? And a lot of the sexting goes on because they think what they're doing is private, and it's not. So that's kind of the pivot point, that you're using technology to have intimate conversations, whether they're sexual in nature or not, is not important, but they're having personal conversations, and they think they're private. And once that relationship is ended, that can be used against them. One of the bigger things that we as a society really have to come to grips with, I certainly didn't know this. I used to be a teacher for 3 years when I was first out of college. I was a teacher for 30 years, but I didn't know until about 2 years ago that, as we had 300-something kids in here one day, that if I had 300 students in there, and they're between the ages of 12 and 18, that 10% of them, 30, are suffering from anxiety and depression. I mean, those are national stats. And if one of your teenager is one of the 10%, if they were one of the 30 that are sitting in here, they are 5 times more likely to try to harm themselves if they're bullied online. Now, 6 years ago, with the proliferation of smartphones, and as we were giving these smartphones to our kids, that's not a statistic we understood, right? Because prior to that time, teenagers didn't have smartphones. But now they do. And I'm not at all telling you they shouldn't have smartphones. I'm telling you, you have to manage that smartphone. You have to manage their behavior with that smartphone. Another thing, which is to me very important, has to do with data. Tell the kids this year that we live in a data-driven society, that everything that we do, so many decisions made by school systems and businesses, marketing companies, it's all based off of data. Right? GE has these things called data lakes, which are just immense volumes of information from everything you can possibly imagine. And they wonder, what can we do with these lakes and lakes and lakes of data? Well, marketing companies have things that are similar to that, right? And where do they get this? They get it from loyalty cards. One place, right? I use a loyalty card. Kroger's one of our biggest customers, and I'm probably one of their biggest customers, right? It's great. You know, I get 50 cents off my gas next time I go to the gas station because I spend $500 on groceries. That's a good thing. But does Kroger give that to me because I'm a great guy? They love my wife and my kids? No. Right? Because they're gleaning data about me. They know who I am, where I live, they know my phone number, they know my email address, right? And they know everything that I buy. And over time, if you take the data from Kroger, and the data from UDM, and the data from Best Buy, and the data from Panera Bread when I get a cup of coffee, right? You put all that stuff together, and you're painting a very detailed portrait of who I am. And your kids are the first generation that is growing up in a society where so much is known about them. And this information is given all the different digital file folders all over the world. And I don't tell you that to scare you at all. I tell you that so that we understand how this environment works. Now I told you the thing about loyalty cards, not that they're bad at all, but that's something everybody can grasp. What most people can't grasp is that when you use Gmail and other email, like Yahoo, right, you're giving up personal data, even personal data about what your conversations are about, right? When you visit a website, you are giving up personal information about the fact that you visited that website. And over time, because that information is all put in like a little digital folder, over time, companies begin to understand your likes and your dislikes, right? Your habits. Apps are the bigger are the biggest in terms of being intrusive, particularly with young people. A few years ago, when Angry Birds was really popular, everybody in the country that had a smartphone or tablet was downloading the free version of Angry Birds, not knowing that Angry Birds was leaking personal information about everybody that downloaded that. Because whether you're downloading it for free or not, you had to give up some information, right? Because you had to give up whatever information was for iTunes, or whatever information was for Google Play, or you know, Windows for Windows, right? It can, Angry Birds can actually even tell where you are at a particular time if you've got a GPS. Now again, that's not to say that Angry Birds is going to end the way in which you live your life. It's not that. It's the collection of all the data that's out there, the buying, the selling, the trading of all of this information, which begins to create this very detailed portrait of who we are as individuals, right? We haven't been in this world that long that we know what is ultimately going to happen. But I can tell you this, in the last 6 months, I've had my key bank card hacked twice, thanks to Home Depot and Target. And I got an Experian account so I can keep track of my credit to make sure nobody was opening up an account in my name. And I had my Experian account hacked. And I came home between many presentations here today and opened up the mail from KeyBank and found out that my credit card was hacked again. So there's all this data about me, data about you, that's out there. And what ultimately happens to this data, we don't know yet. We haven't really gone down that path far. And Central Command, as you might know, for the military, was hacked just the other day, right? And private information, thank the Lord, not a lot of private information, but some private information about some of our officers was hijacked and then published online. So, again, privacy. We hear about it in the back of our busy day when we're driving in our car or we come home from work and we've got the news on passively in the background. Privacy is something that our kids, your kids in particular, are going to have to be very concerned with. Any of you here of Spokio or Spokio? I bring this to your attention because it's something you can go home tonight and try out. So, Spokio it's not really an app, it's a website that you can go to, spokio.com. They have $3.95. If you have somebody's phone number or email address, you can find out just about anything about them. If they've ever used that email address to even apply for a magazine, right, or if they use that phone number for anything ever to do with social media, it will go find all of their social media, any of the public information that's out there on like a county auditor's website, any of it, and it brings it back to your browser and shows it to you. About a year and a half ago, I did one on me. I found my 1985 celebrity station wagon parked in front of my old house that I hadn't lived in since 1992. So that's for $3.95. Goes back to what I said before. There's all this data that we didn't realize we were going to nilly-willy giving out freely to everyone. And that's because you sign up for Google, you sign up for Facebook, you sign up for Instagram, you sign up for Logo Card, you sign up for all of these things that you think are free. Their kids are not free. We live in a harder society. We trade our private information to be able to use apps, to use websites, to use search engines. So what we tell kids is that when you're using an app, when you're using a device, and it's hooked up to the Wi-Fi, think of this. Think of a giant green brain that kind of floats out there in the ethers of the universe. And it has an infinite capacity to see everything you do, an infinite capacity to record everything that you do, and worse, it has an infinite capacity to distribute everything that you do. And I told kids today, I grew up in Delhi, went to a lady here at school, and at the time there were a lot of nuns, and the nuns would teach us that's God. And God sees everything that you do. Why believe that? If you don't believe God sees everything you do, believe that the big brain sees everything that you do. Now it's obviously not a big brain, but it's to kind of help put in their minds use. It's not all the apps that they use. There's probably some of them out there I don't have, and there are probably some of them out there that the children aren't using. But in general, these are the apps. I showed them to you so that you know that 2 of the apps that are out there do a great job of helping you or your child protect their security or their privacy when they're using it. And that, and 2 years ago, I would have said this, but it is true today. Instagram and Facebook. Facebook owns Instagram, and they make it very, very easy to lock down your security, friends only, or just over private. One of them does a horrible job, and that's Ask.fm. And most parents have never heard of Ask.fm. But statistically, throughout the United States, 25% of teenagers, and by teenagers, I really mean, I'll include tweens in there from about 12, maybe 16 years old. It kind of skews a little younger. 25% of the population in that group use Ask.fm. And it's the worst site that you can use. It's so bad that in Europe, which is where it was founded, in Europe it's known as the bullying or the suicide app or site. Because so many young people have been bullied and they've taken their own life. So you may have heard of Ask.com. Ask.com bought them a couple of months ago, and they're either going to take it offline or they're going to totally rebuild it. But I bring it to your attention because so many kids use it. But more importantly, you cannot lock down your security, and anybody can see what your child is doing on Ask.fm, and you don't even have to have an Ask.fm account. And if you know one username on Ask.fm, it's very easy to find everybody else in that particular community because we're so interconnected with one another. When you make a mistake, as I tell kids, you know, those are social media sites, or social media apps basically that are showing. But so many kids make a mistake not through social media, but through apps like Snapchat or Snapchat, or what we call texting, for all intents and purposes, texting apps. And so, you know, they think they have a relationship with somebody, and the moment between this, they said something with a word, that their kids, right? And then the relationship ends. Now someone's mad, and it ends up, that image is now in the hands of somebody else, and it goes public, and it goes viral. And this is what happened back in November. I was in Claremont County, and I got a call from the prosecutor who told me about the story that it just happened. At 9 o'clock, the girl took, the 13-year-old girl took an inappropriate picture of herself, sent it to her boyfriend. At 10 after 9, he put it on Facebook. By 20 after 9, 20 people had downloaded that picture off of Facebook onto their phones, and then by 9:30, she got the first text that was a cyber leak. That's how quickly this stuff can happen. That doesn't happen in every case that way. No, it doesn't. But it did for her. And I think the least of their concerns are the legal concerns. The biggest concern now for that 13-year-old young lady is that forever there's a naked picture of her out there on the internet. And she's never going to get that back. And that's something that can come back tomorrow on hire, or it can come back after she graduates from high school, wants to go to college, or when she graduates from college, is going out on her first job interview, or when she's applying for medical school, or wants to be a firewoman, or a policewoman, whatever she wants to do to make her life better, that photograph might come back behind. So, I talked a little bit about all the other apps that are out there. This is, when you kind of look at the landscape of apps, these are the apps that, in general, we as a society use. Now, YouTube's known as the one with the most widespread usage. I think that's probably true. Facebook, as far as the most daily users, and it's incidentally the fastest growing user group of Facebook are women 55 and over. That's why kids are moving out there. And Instagram, one of the most engaged users. So it really depends on the demographic as to, not just the demographic, but what they're going to plan on using that app for or that website for. But I think what's being used. Some of those things you see up there, like Netflix, iTunes, Pandora, Facebook Messenger, those are apps. I mean, they are apps. And like any app, they have a certain amount of private information associated with them. So what I did, very quickly, I'm not going to go through all these things, I don't think that we're going to be referable for every app. What I try to do is I divided the apps into basically 4 different groups. There's really 5 because there's video games off to the left. But texting apps, dating apps, anonymous apps, and media apps. And the reality is that apps today are like a Swiss Army knife. Right? Swiss Army knife is a knife, but it's also a corkscrew, it's a nail file, it's a lot of different things. So all of these apps anymore have various features and functionality. So texting apps, Snapchat and Kik are some of the ones that you're probably aware of, WhatsApp, Viber, Twitter, and so on. So an important component, regardless of which app your child is using, is understand how kids are using them at nighttime. To me, this is kind of a alarming statistic as to 34 texts after mom and dad are asleep. The average American teen sends 34 text messages. It goes back to what I said at the beginning. Does your child really need to take a smartphone to bed with you? Because it does impact their sleep. It does impact their sleep, right? But who are they talking to? At 11, 12, 1 o'clock in the morning. Now, I don't do this in every presentation I make to teenagers, but right before Christmas I asked the group, the last group I asked them, is this true? Do you guys believe in this statistic? I did that. Yeah. But again, why do they need to have their cell phone with them when they're in bed? And that's up to you as parents. That was an interesting statistic. Snapchat. Incidentally, Snapchat is run by guys 24 years old. Right? Up until October, they only lost millions of dollars a month. Right? And you know what Snapchat is? For most of your kids, it's when they're using it. You didn't know that they are using it. It's kind of the ephemeral texting program that supposedly disappears. And then when we tell kids, they don't really disappear. If they disappear, in most cases, somebody's already happened. But they've never made a dime. They lose millions of dollars a month up until October, where they maybe made a couple $1,000 a month. But they're worth $10 million. And why are they worth $10 million? Because they have your child's data. They know who your child is. They know where your child is. They know who your child associates with. They know when your child uses the app and how they use the app and where they are when they use the app. They're not using it to do anything harm to your children at all. It's just they want to sell that data, and they have so many users, young people using it, and that's a gold mine of information for a company or for advertisers, right? And that's why they're not $10 billion. And that's why the banks are going to give them $10 billion because they have investors that want to invest in it. D plus D equals D is just my way of saying the right dollars, the right demographic will ultimately equal the right dollars. The right data, the right demographic equals the right dollars. That is the internet economy. That is it. That's why so many things are free. It's all about your private information. And I'm not saying that bad or good. I'm saying we have to understand that as a nation and as parents, that's why Snapchat is growing Kik. Some of your children do use Kik. You have to understand that within some legal circles, Kik is known as the pedophile app. And it's an odd app in that it not only is a texting app, but there's about 23 plugins, additional apps that you can plug into that app that interact with it. And as far as pedophiles are concerned, many people in law enforcement believe it is the app of choice for pedophiles to be able to meet young boys and young girls. Brings us to dating apps. We usually don't think, well, what? My 12-year-old, 13-year-old, they're not going to be messing with dating apps. 7% of the users of Tinder, which is less a dating site and more a hookup site. 7% of the users of Tinder are under the age of 30. They have no business being on there, and yet I would imagine most parents don't even think that their child might be there. But 7%. Now, that doesn't include those that are 13, 14, 15, 16, and 17. because many of the people that are on Tinder are college age or above. Brings us to anonymous apps. Anonymous apps have had incredible growth over the last couple of years. Some of them you might know. Have you heard of Yik Yak? Yik Yak's a big one. Chat Roulette, Whisper, Mangle, SFM can be an anonymous app, but we'll talk about a couple of them here. A student was arrested in Richmond earlier this year for making a bomb threat. He thought what he was doing was totally anonymous. And I encourage every one of you in here, if you don't have Yik Yak on your smartphone, download Yik Yak on your smartphone for 1 hour. Just do it for 1 hour. And what it does is it will go out and it automatically recognizes where you are, and it will find all the conversations within about 1.5 mile radius of where you are. And the conversations are inane and highly sexualized, highly racist, and not the type of thing you want your child associated with, but I ask you to try it anyway. So that you understand, you find that on your child's phone, it's nothing but problems. Now, I bring up this guy, this kid from New Richmond, because he thought he was totally anonymous. And as it is with almost every app, right, or every device, there is an IP address with every device. And because he made a bomb threat, law enforcement were able to get a court order to actually go to Yik Yak and find out where that individual was that made that bomb threat. And it only took 36 to 48 hours, I think, for them to find out who made that threat. So be aware of it, and I highly suggest you take a look at it. SFM, I won't spend a lot of time on that, we kind of already addressed it, but why are kids on SFM? And it's because of the anonymous nature of the questions. I would be willing to bet that not 20 or 25% of the students in Harrison are on it, but I'm going to guess that about 10% of the students in Harrison, in this community, are using SFM. I did kind of an informal poll, and some kids would raise their hand. It's another one that's very highly sexualized. A lot of inappropriate pictures, but more importantly, so many young people will give their real name, the name of their school, their home address, and their telephone numbers, and their Instagram name, and their Facebook name. You give all that information out, and anybody in the world can get that information and ultimately track that child down. Now, do I think everybody's trying to track a child down? I do not think so. But understand, it's totally open. It's a totally wide open app. Which brings us to the media apps, and you're probably familiar with most of these. Facebook, Flickr, YouTube, Sticker you may have heard of, Tumblr, Vine, Skype. One of the great things, I'll tell you two great things about Facebook. So Facebook just came out today, I think it is, with Amber Alerts. You don't even have to sign up for it. It will automatically recognize where you are. And if you're in an area where that Amber Alert is relevant, it will send you an update about that Amber Alert. That's great. Another thing is that I told kids today, it's great for fundraising. So there was a post a friend of mine put on Facebook on Wednesday of this past week. He ran into a young woman who had 4 kids, living in a home in Priceville, no furniture. She lived there for 6 months, no bed. The kids were sleeping on hardwood floors. And I don't know how he met her and his wife. He put up one post to all his Facebook friends. Within 24 hours, he got 5 beds, innumerable pillows, sheets, and blankets, and $4,000. It's tremendous. That's why parents say, I don't want my child to ever be on any social media. I'm not here to tell you that. I'm here to say, manage it, and realize there's a lot of good things that can take place through social media. Now, here's one of the bad things you want to be concerned with. Facebook also just announced they're launching anonymous rooms. The app is called Rooms. And if you were in college in the 90s or early 2000s, you might have been involved in chat rooms, right? The chat rooms were a good place to be in the 1990s and early 2000s. I guarantee you they're not necessarily a good place for an underage child to be today. So be aware, you don't hear a whole lot about it. I haven't heard a whole lot of kids that we speak to talk about rooms, but be aware that it's out So if you're looking at your child's phone, make sure that room is not on there. And Yahoo bought Tumblr. You guys heard of Tumblr? So this was about a year ago. They paid, what was $1.1 million. Tumblr is a blogging site. But a lot of young people will go to Tumblr. And while there are a lot of great blogs there are a lot of blogs that are not fit for somebody that's under the age of 17. So be aware of Tumblr. And a lot of the content that's on Tumblr is highly sexualized and oftentimes racial in nature as well. YouTube. Now, I'm bringing up YouTube, and it's kind of like, gosh, YouTube, that was around when I was young. Almost, right? It's been out there forever. But understand this about YouTube. YouTube is there are many great things on YouTube. But what's happened recently with YouTube, you might have known 3 years ago, they did the cinnamon challenge. Have you ever heard of the cinnamon challenge? Where particularly high school and college kids would inhale as much cinnamon as they could, and then they would record themselves on video showing. Right? Now, is that the worst thing in the world? No. But what they've done, this year, it's the fire challenge. There have only been a few instances that I'm aware of in Cincinnati, but there's 30,000 videos on YouTube of teenagers pouring lighter fluid or alcohol on themselves and lighting themselves on fire. And then jumping in the shower, jumping in the bath, and jumping into a swimming pool. So YouTube has a tendency to start fast. YouTube also has a lot of web series. Some of the web series are great. They're free, others aren't. And one we have heard of Slender Man. Slender Man, again, is a fictitious character. It wasn't created to do any harm to children, to their brains, or to society in general, right? It's kind of like an online horror story. But a lot of kids took that Slender Man figure as being real. And we had one case in Cincinnati in the summer where a young lady attempted to kill her mother in honor of, almost a sacrifice to, Slender Man. There was two girls in Wisconsin who did the same thing. Is your child doing that? Probably not. But never leave your child alone on YouTube. As I always tell kids and parents, YouTube is like New York City. It's the best city in the United States. It's the worst city in the United States, right? The best of the best is there. The worst of the worst is there. They need some values. YouTube music videos, some of them are tremendous. I'm going to talk about that in a minute and why that is a concern. Did you guys know that the overwhelming majority of music today kids find on YouTube as opposed to Spotify or iTunes or Pandora because they're watching the music videos that are associated with it? Years ago in the 80s, kids were watching MTV. MTV doesn't have music videos. YouTube has plenty of music video and very high quality audio content. I'll talk about that here in a minute. Had one young man today come up to me and to the prosecutor immediately afterwards to say, I noticed you didn't mention anything about Wii or Sony PlayStation, but I've had some guy making comments to me on my Sony PlayStation. What should I do? Well, the reality is, if your son or daughter has a Wii or a Sony PlayStation, they have a computer. The chances are they can hook up to the Wi-Fi that's in the house. It is no different than using a smartphone, using a tablet, using any other device that can be hooked up to the internet. Understand that who your child is communicating with, because many of these games, right, can be played with people halfway around the world. Most of them aren't trying to do your child harm. In this particular case, this young man was not real comfortable with some of the comments that this other person was making to him. So very quickly, just talking about the actual apps, these are the things that I know most parents are concerned with. We have to kind of understand the technology and the apps behind these apps before you can really talk about it. So in the state of Ohio and in Indiana and Kentucky, if you're under the age of 18, you take a naked picture of yourself, you create child pornography. Ms. Keegan from the prosecutor's office will talk about some of the legal ramifications. You send it to somebody, you distributed child pornography, you wake up one morning, somebody sent you a Snapchat, and it's naked. You're 28% of the teen population throughout the United States has done this. So understand why it's important. You need to know what to do. Now, what's causing this proliferation of young people taking naked pictures of themselves? Number one, they're young, right? Number two, they can. They've got the technology. Culturally, it's okay. Movie stars, musicians, they're all doing this type of thing. And as one study shows, that kids that watch, and I don't know why this is true, but kids that watch their music videos on YouTube have a greater propensity to send inappropriate pictures of themselves across the net. I'm not sure why, but I think if you look at some of the music videos that are on YouTube, the ones that we're watching, that might have a little bit to do with it. Here's the stats. These aren't my stats. This is from the Journal of the American Medical Association. I've been very fortunate to work with Children's Hospital on 4 different occasions. And the Journal of the American Medical Association suggests 28% of teens have sent this type of information. 31% have been asked for it, and 57% have been asked to send it. So 57% of the teens in the United States, somebody has asked them to send a naked picture. I was at a private school back in October. It was a private high school, and one girl told us, Mr. Seth, you have no idea the pressure we girls are under to send naked pictures of ourselves to boys. And she equated it to when you guys were growing up, you probably had people at parties pressuring you to smoke a cigarette. Well, if you smoked one cigarette, you didn't get cancer. But you send one picture, and you have no idea what that one picture is going to do to your life. I thought that was a very, very good statement, a very bright statement from a young lady. She was a freshman at this private school. And I believe that's true. And we were presenting over at Marymount today, and the prosecutor made a comment to the girls that if a young man asks you to send that type of picture, he doesn't deserve you. And every girl, all 300 of them, erupted in applause. And what that said to me is, they get it. That's really happening. There is pressure to do that. Does it mean that they're bad and the boys are bad? No. But that's part of our culture today, and we need to get around it. There's also, besides just inappropriate pictures, there's inappropriate conversations. I won't spend a lot of time with it, but if you go to netlingo.com, there's about 53 to 60 abbreviations that young people sometimes use to kind of camouflage the types of conversations that they're having. Teen girls find their sexy photos end up on porn websites. It's absolutely true. And this brief video that I'm going to show you kind of points to what I'm talking about.
I was absolutely mortified. She quickly realized her pictures were on several sites and immediately tried removing them, since she had never given her consent for them to be posted. But once a file is on the internet, it's extremely difficult to permanently remove it. My brother used to work for the Navy Computer Crimes Task Force and saw a few cases just like Rebecca's. As a certified forensic computer examiner, he's now the CEO and founder of BitSec Global Forensics.
The challenge is when you delete a file, it's not really being deleted. It's just being hidden from your view, and the space that file occupies becomes available for other files in the future. So really all you're doing is making it invisible.
Law enforcement agencies or task forces use special forensic software to recover files. There are several commercial or publicly freely available programs anyone can use. And even when you do recover a file, it could be just a copy of it.
Once that picture in the scenario will be transferred to the computer, many times the operating system, unbeknownst to the user, will be multiple copies of that file and the other artifacts of that file.
And that's the issue Rebecca Wells keeps running into. Despite a lawsuit she filed against her ex-boyfriend, her photos show up on these sites from time to time. Even her Googling her name and searching for certain files, Rebecca's warning to young girls,
her picture on one of those websites. I did not personally know her, but I knew some people that did know her because I did around so many different schools. She was a good teacher, good person, made a bad mistake. And as a result of that mistake, she had no legal consequences from sending an inappropriate picture. And that's why I tell kids, forget the legal consequences for right now. She's no longer a teacher. There are consequences for her actions. And 100,000 people downloaded her photograph. She wasn't Taylor Swift. She wasn't Beyonce. She was a teacher at a private school in Greater Cincinnati. And she paid dearly because that degree that she went for, that teaching certificate that she went for, and she taught for, I think, 10 years, she'll never be able to use it again. That's a tremendous penalty to pay for a lack of judgment. Right? So I don't say forget about the legal consequences, but understand that's the least of your concerns. I'm going to ask Kristen to come up here right now, but do yourself a favor. Understand the privacy issues, and you can find that out at wirefamily.org, and also how this all relates to cyberbullying, which is a real passion of mine, because kids can be very cruel to one another, and when you consider that 10% of the population of the school district, every school district is suffering from depression, when they're bullied, those are dire consequences for everyone. With that, I hand it over to Kristen Keeper from the Hamilton County Prosecutor's Office. Thank you very much.
Good evening, everybody. My name is Kristen Keeper, and I am an assistant prosecutor with the Hamilton County Prosecutor's Office. And for those of you who aren't familiar with the legal system, we work with law enforcement agencies and other employees to prosecute crimes. A lot of what Mr. Smith talked about today with you is the nude pictures, inappropriate pictures, the sexting. So I'm going to kind of focus on that, and I'm going to kind of go real quick because I know everybody wants to get out of here. One thing that's really important to know is that if you are under the age of 18, as it's no surprise you are a minor, minors are not allowed to take naked pictures of themselves and send them out. That's creation and dissemination of child pornography. And under the Ohio Revised Code, which is the law in the state, that's a felony in the second degree. So if you are a juvenile and you are charged with that, and then you are found guilty of that, you're looking at the possibility of going upstate to the Department of Youth Services, which is prison, upstate, for a minimum of a year, possibly up until you're 21 years of age. So that's a possibility. That's the worst that can happen to you, and on top of having registered as a sex offender for a possibility of 25 years. So again, those are the two worst things that can happen to you under that charge. If you're 18 years old and you are in possession of a nude picture of a minor, for instance, you're an 18-year-old boy and you have a picture of your 17-year-old girlfriend, you're looking at a possibility of 2 to 8 years in the Ohio Department of Corrections on top of registering as a sex offender. So again, receiving a picture and turning around and sending it, that's again disseminating, it's a felony in the second degree, and the same penalties I just mentioned apply. Simply having a picture on your phone, that alone is a felony in the fourth degree, that's possession of child pornography. And you're looking at a minimum of 6 months up until you turn 21 in the Ohio, or excuse me, in the Department of Youth Services. So again, that's the worst thing that can happen to you under that charge. Also looking at possibly having to register as a sex offender. Again, these are possibilities of charges that can be filed for instances like this. These are not the charges that are filed in all of these cases. Our office, along with law enforcement, takes every one of these cases on a case-by-case basis. And Mr. Smith didn't really talk about the Justice Affirmative Act, but actually that act, which was passed in 2012, gives the schools a wide latitude of dealing with these types of offenses. So it's our office's preference, I should say, to let law enforcement, let the parents, and let the school try and deal with these situations first and foremost. And it's where they don't get cooperation. If the school's not getting cooperation, if law enforcement's not getting cooperation, or if there's some unusual circumstances, that's usually when we're brought in to prosecute. So again, I'm trying to be real brief, just touch on things that I knew you guys wanted to hear about today, but I believe you have an officer here that would love to speak to you.
Good evening. My name is Chief Lindsay in the Harrison Police Department. The last 2 days, this being the fourth time, the 3 assemblies that the students were at, what we talked to them about, you've seen some of it tonight. The juvenile prosecutor's office spoke about what happened. And one of the biggest things that we tried to teach the kids was to take 5 seconds. Every time you think about sending something, forwarding it, opening something, take 5 seconds to think about what you're doing. And it's important to know that for us in law enforcement, and what we've been telling everyone, in cases here in Harrison, where we are told that on an electronic device there are images, or sexting, or cyberbullying, where there's menacing text threats, we are going to forensically have those devices reviewed. And then we're going to determine exactly what's on it. And as you've been told here tonight, it's very important understanding how Ohio law is written regarding photos and videos of minors. Those under the age of 18, it's all considered child pornography. And before electronic devices, the purpose of that was to keep adults from having photos of children. And now that we're in the electronic world, where a lot of times law does not keep up with reality, children unknowingly and unfortunately knowingly find themselves in a situation where they might have possibly multiple felony charges that as the police department in Harrison, we have to investigate and we have to send it to the prosecutor's office. Police officers in the city of Harrison and across the state, in misdemeanor cases, most officers have discretion. They don't have to bring a charge. In any instance in the city of Harrison, where the Harrison officer is investigating an incident where there's allegations that there are nude photos or videos that contain minors, we will have it forensically reviewed, downloaded, and then everything sent to the Hamilton County Juvenile Prosecutor for review for charges, as the law requires. And she mentioned it, and it's important to understand that many people know that adults have a sex registry as an offender in Hamilton County State of Ohio. An adult, if you go on the Hamilton County Sheriff's website, an adult can be adjudicated by a judge. They have to register where they live, and you can go on the website and look up who the offenders are. Well, the same thing holds true for juvenile sex offenders in the state of Ohio. There is a juvenile sexual registry for sex offenders. So the repercussions of this are great. And what we've been telling the students, what we've been telling those in the assemblies, if you have an image on your phone or a device, if you're a student, if you're a child, you tell your parent, if you're at school, and someone sends you an image and it's on your phone, notify the staff here so that the Harrison Police Department can take that device, and no one wants to arrest or charge anyone who unknowingly is involved in the receipt of child pornography. That is not what the point is. More importantly, both here in Harrison with our juvenile court and the Hamilton County Juvenile Court, the point of juvenile court is rehabilitation. It's not to arrest, charge, embarrass, punish, put them in jail. Now, there are juveniles that deserve that. And that's what the judge's job is to define what that is. So the first thing that we're doing here with what's currently going on is identifying what exactly is going on. 2 things of note for adults and for kids. When the police get involved, a lot of people instantly decide to either lie, destroy evidence, obstruct, thinking that the cops will never find out. In a lot of cases where the original act can be forgiven or can be adjudicated without real formal instances of the justice system, the destruction of evidence, the obstruction of justice, that part of it puts it all in a whole different realm. So what we've been telling the students for the last 2 days is not to lie to the parents, to the staff, to the police department, For those who want to get lawyers, we encourage that in the criminal justice profession. There's nothing wrong with that. But what I don't want to see is a young child, a young adult, get in trouble unnecessarily because they're so afraid of the system that they would try to hide it or not trust their parents or trust the staff here at the school. So as the police chief of this city, I want everyone to understand my two sixth graders, my twins who are sixth graders, sat in one of those assemblies today. And what I hope everyone understands is we want every student and young adult in this school district to grow up, to take our positions, to do well in life. Right now, there's things like this that can happen and follow them for a long, long time. And if you don't take 5 and think about what you're sending on that send button, you could be a 50-year-old person looking at naked photos of you when you were 13. Because once they're on the internet, once they're in that system, you're not going to ever get them off. So take 5. If anyone has any questions, I understand that Chris Brown is coming forward next, and I thank you for your time.
First of all, let's give all of our speakers a round of applause. If you have questions, please raise your hand. Amy will come around with a microphone. Not for me, but if you have questions for me or anybody on the panel here, we'll be more than happy to answer those if we can. Anybody have any questions? Don't be shy. Give me word.
A lot tonight, but as a parent, if I go home and have this conversation with my child, and then, I find out that there are nude pictures on the phone, do you recommend that I come directly to school personnel, or how do you proceed in good faith as a parent at this point?
Jurisdictionally here in Harrison, if you go to this school, you could wind up having 3 or 4 different police departments possibly have jurisdiction over that aspect of it. I would say the best course that you could do, if they're a student of this school, you can call Chris Brown, you can call the principals here, they can refer you, the principals can contact me, and I can get in contact with you, and if it's another jurisdiction, we'll get it done correctly. The thing that I'm afraid is going to happen, and when we do forensics, if people start deleting stuff, and then other forensics show that they had it, and then they don't, and the parent says, well, yeah, I had it, and I heard that in the assembly, but we thought it'd be okay to do it. And I'm not saying that someone is going to charge you for that, but the easiest way is to make that phone call, make that contact, and then let us in law enforcement, the prosecutor's office, make that decision on whether or not it gets deleted or not. That's my recommendation. The other recommendation from the criminal justice perspective is you can always call your family attorney and ask them. But in all truthfulness, the easiest way would be to contact the school if they're a student.
Anybody else?
I just have a question to clarify something. When the prosecutor was up and she mentioned some law that came out in 2012, and it made it sound like if you had students that were cooperating and parents that were cooperating, I guess, and saying, here's my phone, look at it, then possibly law enforcement wouldn't have had to get involved. Did I understand that correctly?
When I was explained that by my superiors a couple months ago, the example that I was given of that is if you have an underage girl who has taken the picture of herself and sent it, and then it's been turned around and sent over and over again, some schools have decided, maybe there's other courses of action such as expulsion, maybe that not prosecuting because there's several different facets to that, if that can be done. Obviously, if it's a felony offense, like the chief said, that's something we have to turn over to be evaluated by my office. But the Jessica Logan Act basically gave the school the ability to, confiscate phones. They can do things quicker. They have more things at their disposal than prosecuting. Sometimes, if a child is being expelled or they're facing other ramifications, at some point we're just piling on, depending on how serious the charges are. And I'm talking about a wide array. There's misdemeanor charges, and then we're looking at felony charges. So there is a difference. And again, every case is a case-by-case basis. They're all going to be different. So what I was saying isn't going to be across the board. It's really a variable situation. So I realize that was probably confusing to talk, and I apologize. I don't do this for a living. Mr. Smith does. I just argue for a living, so I'm just trying to come in here and clarify some things for you.
I want to thank Chris Brown and Dave Baker and Chief Lindsay and all of you for having this meeting for our community tonight. I guess my question is for Mr. Smith. When you were talking about apps and everything, and I don't know if you're involved with product development or not, or would it even be worth it. Is there such a thing as an app that can disable the camera on a phone? And if not, is that on the horizon, or can you answer that question?
Well, off the top of my head, I don't know any specifically that will do it, but I will be willing to bet that there are definitely apps that will help you disable that function on a phone. My suggestion is if you just go to either Google Play or if you go to the iTunes store and just put that in your search term, that it'll likely tell you if you can. I'm 99.9% positive, but I don't know of any names of them at this point. What I can tell you is that there are many, many companies that are working on it right now on ways to very easily from your iPad or from your wife's iPad to be able to have total control over your son or your daughter's devices. It's getting to that. It's getting to that point. In fact, Apple at the electronics show in Las Vegas announced that they're getting into what's called as the Internet of Things. I don't know if you've heard of that term, but what is about to happen, it's happening already, but will definitely be during the next 5 years, is that so many of the devices in your home, all the way down to your light bulb, to your toaster, your coffee, or your coffee maker, your refrigerator, your stove, will have an IP address. The only thing that's kept that from happening today is some type of graphical user interface, something that sits in the middle that gives you total control of that. And more devices are coming online that do that. And Apple's going to do it, and I think Apple's going to do an excellent job of it. What is really happening, there was an article the other day where Bill Gates was quoted that in America, we do a horrible job of anticipating how quickly things are going to happen. We think things are going to happen very quickly in 1 or 2 years, but things actually happen, take a longer time to happen than 1 or 2 years, but then in the third year, we're deluged with it. And I can tell you from being in the business, in 2006, a few people had devices. By 2008, it started exploding. By 2010, parents were overwhelmed with technology. And you look at how you guys are today, like how I am today, as a father and also as a grandfather. It's very difficult to stay on top of it. So that's kind of a long answer to your question. I don't know of any today that do it, but I'm virtually certain there are apps that will help you override that on your phone or on your child's device, and I encourage you to do it. A lot of children, particularly those that are under the age of 12, are using things like iPod Touches. And iPod Touch is fine unless it's hooked up to the Wi-Fi at home. And believe it or not, I've run into parents that did not realize that an iPod Touch could actually hook into the Wi-Fi at home. And I've heard parents tell me that at 10 o'clock every night, they pull the router out of the wall, to make sure that their kid can find some way to be able to actually get online. That's a very simple, very crude way to disable a device. But in fact, that's what he does for his 3 children.
Thank you. Yep. And then I guess this is for Mr. Baker. Have you tell us, share with us, please, what the school policy is on cell phone use and limits regarding during class hours?
Every day, our students are allowed to use their cell phone before the school day, during lunch, and in between periods. We do have some teachers that will say, somebody has a smartphone, I need you to look up this information or this information, so there is some involvement with it. We are moving closer and closer to one-to-one technology in our building, and we're probably 2 or 3 years away from, instead of purchasing textbooks, allowing students to purchase or rent, lease a computer, an iPad, and that would be there to keep for their perhaps sophomore, junior, and senior year. So we know that in order to prepare our students for the workplace for tomorrow and for college, to make sure that college and career ready, that's the direction that we're really moving. The problem is that, as kind of been explained, it's coming so quickly, and there are so many different apps. It's difficult for us to pick those things. I've said this over and over again. It is more difficult today to be a teenager than ever before. It's difficult to be a parent of a teenager than ever before because we don't know everything that's out there. I feel like I know a lot, but after listening to Mr. Smith, I felt like I've learned more than I've learned in the last 10 years.
That's right.
There's a lot out there. And for our students, they're going to places where the boundaries haven't been clearly established. And so that's a tough thing. What do the boundaries need to be? And we're having a lot of those conversations with the students. They can use them, they do use them. Our hope and prayer is that they're not going to places that they shouldn't go, but we're also realistic in knowing that that's all possible.
Thank you.
Another question.
I would like to add just 2 really quick points here.
Question.
One slide that I have up here, and the chief was talking about, deleting files. The children have to understand that you really don't delete files. You think you delete them. This is kind of an example. When the iPhone 6 was released here in the United States and over in Europe, a lot of people were trading in their Android phones to get iPhone 6s, right? And when you do that, the store, or you might, actually delete everything off your phone, reset it back to its factory settings. And these people did the same thing. Well, a company over in Europe bought 20 used Android phones that had been wiped clean and reset to factory settings. And through forensics, they were able to go back in and find all of the inappropriate photographs. I think we said there was 1,000 photographs that were recovered from 20 phones. Your child can try to delete something, but if it becomes a legal issue and the police are involved and they get their computer forensics team involved, they'll find the entire string of events will be tied together, even though it's ultimately been deleted. One other thing I'd ask you to do, because I didn't get to go into all the slides, but to me it's important that you understand, how children can find themselves in trouble. And there's one video I would like you to search on YouTube. Just go to YouTube and just type in the search bar, the sextortion of Amanda Todd. This actually took place in 2006, really before there were a lot of apps. She was not using an app. She was going online. She was a good kid, little trouble at times, but her parents gave her access in her bedroom to her own laptop. And they loved her. They didn't know how to manage the technology. And give yourself 45 minutes to watch this video that was produced up in Canada, and you'll see what really exists out there, kind of the dark underworld of the internet. Most people are good. I honestly believe most people are good, but not everybody is. And not everybody has the best interest of your child at heart. This young lady is no longer on the face of the earth because the images that she shared with somebody she shouldn't have shared them with found their way throughout the school, and she got bullied, and she ended up taking her own life. My passion, the passion for Cincinnati Bell, is to make sure young people are not harming themselves because of the misuse of technology. Don't take your kids' stuff away. Manage it. Use it for good as opposed to some of the way it's been used over maybe the last year or so.
I got a question.
Yes, sir.
For the less savvy parents, you showed a lot of stuff tonight. Are there any hands-on organizations where they can go and meet and talk and learn how to look for these things other than going online? Not everybody can do that. Not every parent can handle that.
First of all, that's a very good question, and I can't give you an answer to that. I know of places periodically, local high schools, like other high schools, sometimes will have an hour event. But they're events, like I didn't throw as much at you as I would have liked to for there are so many things that we need to kind of catch up with. It takes probably an hour and a half, 2 hours, just to kind of paint a portrait of what we're dealing with. It's nothing that you guys can't do. It really isn't. But it's something that, today we talk about, it isn't enough to get a degree, a high school degree. It's not enough to get a college degree. You have to learn the rest of your life, right? In our economy, we have to constantly learn. When you're talking about technology to enhance your children, you have to learn the rest of your life, or at least the life that they're in your home and you're responsible for. It takes a lot of reading. The two easiest things you can do: set up a news feed, from Gmail, and get the app Flipboard for your device. And you use those two things, and it'll do an excellent job trying to keep you in touch with what you need to be concerned with. In fact, thank you for bringing it up, and I'm embarrassed to say that. Who said beach shakers? Okay. I'm actually involved in a parenting symposium at Beach Shakers. In fact, I was supposed to today to be at Beach Shakers to talk about how we were going to put this thing together, but because of what we were doing here, I asked them if I could sneak out and catch up with them later on this week. I've done one at Beach Shakers, but the one we've done at Beach Shakers is for foster parents. And so I wasn't sure if Beach Shakers was going to open that up to parents in general. I can tell you this, that generally, I do probably 2 or 3 of these among parents, and most of the time parents don't show up. And it's the sad truth. So I applaud you for caring enough to be here tonight. And that's why I said at the beginning, whatever you have learned, if you would take it back to your community, your brothers, your sisters, and those that you associate with, and let them know that there are ways to manage their child's use of technology. And if you go to wiredfamily.org, there's a lot of information up there that I think can help you as well.
I have a question both as a parent and also as a teacher. If I am supervising kids on a social event in my own home or even at school, what are the legal ramifications if something like that happens using an iPod, using a phone, a smartphone, when I am the person supervising?
Did you hear that? The legal ramifications, if you're responsible for an event, maybe at your home or at your school, whatever, what are the legal ramifications of children using devices when they are basically in your care? Did I articulate that right?
You might have better answer this than me. I'm not really familiar with, I do juveniles, so we don't ever have that problem.
If you're an adult and you are supervising children and you knowingly permit that, you're going to have problems with any police department. No. If it's unknowing, when you first find out about it, if you report it, everything is fine. If the only way you would be in trouble with my department if we were investigating something like that is if you were knowingly doing something. But if it's not to your knowledge, you didn't know what was happening, as long as when it came to your knowledge, you reported the crime or the possible crime, everything would be fine from our perspective.
I can tell you what happens out in Hollywood, and I think it's a great idea. There aren't a lot of good ideas that come out of Hollywood. Is when you have a bunch of famous people get together, when they walk in the door, they have to turn in their smartphones. Why? Because they don't want any of the things that are going on in that house to be recorded and today not everybody has an old phone, so I understand where that figure top.
Anything else? Thank you all for coming very, very much. We appreciate it. If you have specific questions that you'd like to ask individually, feel free to come down. Again, thank you, and hope safe.